Okay. And let me share my screen. All right. So I will share this presentation with you guys in an email tomorrow. Usually it takes a little bit of time and I probably won't get to it tonight. And then the statement for new learning with everybody, just in case you need it again. So I'm not going to go over every single slide. Okay, because a lot of this is in the handbook. However, I will say that the handbook that you guys can currently view is from 2018. And so it's a little bit out to date and a little bit confusing on certain things. Not so much for the folks that are taking practicum in the fall, because they're kind of on the same track as fall admits, but for you guys that are going into internship, if you read the handbook, I would assume it's a little confusing because it talks about dates as if you're taking internship in the spring. And so just know that that's on the top of my to-do list for the next month, is to really revamp the whole clinical handbook. Once I do that, I'll send it out to you guys. But a lot of this information is in the handbook, so I'm not going to dwell a lot on it. Also, I mean, you've been in practicum, so you're pretty familiar with a lot of the kind of technical things, working with Tavera, what to expect in terms of getting into eCampus. So, when we're thinking about internship, you basically are looking at it as a full-time job. It's 600 hours over the course of the semester. We don't know what the fall semester will look like as of right now. Again, in the handbook, and tonight, one of the slides I think says over the course of a 16-week semester. I mean, my hope is it's 16 weeks. I hope that we can get kind of back to a little bit of a more normal life by fall. But the biggest thing is, it is the semester. If we have to work out things around COVID, we certainly can and will. And so you just have to let us know if things are coming up for you, meaning if you think you're not going to be able to get the hours in the amount of time allotted within the semester. As you know, it's not offered in the summer. And so, of course, we hope you get it completed within that semester. And the biggest kind of lingering question that most students have for internship is kind of around the dual degree aspect of our internship, which is completely unique and really not a lot of schools in the country do it. So within our internship, you're fulfilling two different specialty areas, essentially, the clinical rehab counseling side of it and the mental health counseling side of it. And, a lot of times there's questions about the type of work that you're doing and how you balance it. And, whether you're doing integrated sites or two different separate sites, your internship can look different, and your logs and how you're tracking things can look different. Although I've tried to implement some things that will be there for you in internship, where if you're doing an integrated site, you'll be able to kind of select like a clinical mental health counseling intake and a rehab counseling intake. And so then you can track, so you're kind of making sure that you're getting that 300-300 balance. Because if you are doing an integrated site, then it is equal balance. So you can't, flip or flop. But again, it gets a little confusing because supervision, right? And indirect hours are, a lot of times there's a lot of overlap there. So I just ask that you work, closely with your faculty supervisor. It might be me, honestly. I did teach the internship section in the fall. And so I haven't gotten my class schedule yet for the fall, but it very well could be me that's actually your faculty instructor, which hopefully you're all right with, but I like teaching practicum and internship. I think it's a lot of fun. So, I've gone over in these slides different activities that could be considered rehab activities that could be considered clinical mental health activities. Again, a lot of it's the same. It's just going to be a matter of depending on what type of site you're at, whether it's two sites or one site, and how you track things on Tavera is just going to look a little bit different for you. I will ask, so do you all know where you will be as of right now, or at the very least, if you're going to be doing integrated or two different sites?
I know my practicum site right now, she offered me placement for my internship, but I'll still need to find a place for rehab which I believe is DARS here in Virginia, the Department of Aging and Rehab.
Yeah. Have you reached out to them yet?
Yeah, I did. I started reaching out to them at the beginning of fall semester, just
Okay.
because for practicum too. So I'm pretty sure I have placement there. I just got to confirm.
Okay, great. That's good. Very good. Others?
I think I am staying where I'm at. I have a meeting on Tuesday to have more of the details clarified and talk about it,
Okay.
but I'm pretty sure I'm staying where I'm at.
Okay. Where are you at right now?
I'm at a hospital, a behavioral health hospital, and we have, it's integrated, so I should
Gotcha.
be good.
Okay. Is Shanice still on? Maybe not. And I also, this actually triggered a memory of mine. I have another a document that I'll send to you all, just so you have it, for those that are doing integrated and looking at behavioral health sites, how those tasks can kind of be separated out for clinical mental health and rehab. So hopefully that'll help in that meeting too. So when it comes to the hours, what we're looking at is direct service again versus indirect. You guys are, I'm hoping, getting really familiar with what that means and what that looks like. Direct service hours being, when you're actually working with a client. It can continue to be on Zoom, on phone, those live interactions, individual counseling, group counseling, all of that's going to be those direct service hours. If you can bank some of those earlier in the semester, I always say do that so you're not as stressed out about it leading into the end of the semester. But at the same time, it can be harder to get those direct hours, especially if you're starting at a new site and having to, take those first couple of weeks to really get your feet wet, get trained and up to speed on how everything works. And you're maybe not being handed a caseload right off the bat, that first week in August. So, it does take some time, and that's understandable. What I typically like to see is by mid-semester that my students are about halfway through or close or approaching that. And so if they're not, then I can have that conversation with my students to see what the issue is and loop in a site supervisor if I need to. But I personally don't really like to let it get any further than midterms. If somebody's really behind, then I'm definitely contacting the site supervisors and seeing how we can bump up those hours. It's just not a good idea to wait till the end of the semester, especially if you're really planning on graduating in December. So indirect hours, I'm assuming you guys are, realizing that those are much easier to get, whether it's through trainings, staff meetings, the copious amounts of documentation that you do on a day-to-day basis, working as a counselor and the record keeping, the case management type stuff. As you've been doing in practicum, the same will apply for internship in terms of your coursework and the quote unquote group supervision that you're getting in class. So you're still going to have those weekly discussions on eCampus for internship, and that'll count for your group hours. And so you need to count those, and any preparation for presentations and internship. There's a case presentation that you do that would be hours that are indirect hours that you can count as well. When you're looking for any kind of clinical site, I'm just going to go over this real quick because it seems like most of you guys, really are on the ball and know where you're headed. You just want to make sure that if you're looking for an integrated site, that it actually, really does cover all the different aspects of it being an integrated site, because, there might be sites where, yeah, they do some rehab stuff, but is it going to be enough to cover the 300 hours that you need to have for it to be an integrated site, or vice versa? Some people are able to do an integrated site at a state vocational rehab agency. Those individuals typically have a little bit harder time getting the clinical mental health hours in because, traditionally state VR is not doing a lot of, that one-on-one mental health counseling with their clients. So you really just want to make sure that if it is an integrated site, that you really can get kind of that equal split. Make sure that, the site is, working with a client population that you actually find interesting, that maybe you want to, continue to work with later on down the road. And that, there's a variety of services that are being provided. It doesn't have to be, your golden job It doesn't have to be your top placement. And really even now, because as you've realized with practicum, it can be harder to find sites. Sites are taking fewer students right now, or they're just not taking students at all. Again, I hope that changes in the fall and moving forward, but you know, if it's not your first choice, just know that it's not where you actually have to end up at the end of the day. It's just internship, and you can get those hours and respectfully leave or decline a job offer if you really want to. So, you know, we do have an outdated list. I'll be the first to say it's completely outdated on the website. And I'm going to work on trying to get that up to date a little bit better, I guess. But really everything is supposed to be going into Tavera, so you can search for sites in Tavera. You know, talk with your advisor. If you're having trouble with sites, reach out to me. If anything happens, especially for those of you that have already located sites, and let's say something happens in the summer and you know, you're at a point where you're like, oh geez, I don't have a site anymore for whatever reason. You know, I am working through the summer mostly on the grant, but a little bit of my responsibility doing clinical coordination covers the summer as well. So, you know, please let me know if anything comes up last minute and we can try to help out. You know, we definitely aren't finding sites or, you know, getting the placement for you, but I can help kind of provide guidelines, guidance, look over websites. I've met before on Zoom with potential sites and potential supervisors to talk about what the program requirements are and whether it's a good fit or not. So I'm happy to do that too. If anybody needs a little bit of additional information from me, that's what I'm here for. When it comes to supervision, you know, again, the supervisor doesn't have to have you know, an LPC necessarily. The supervisor does need to have a master's degree and has to specialize in that area in which they're practicing. Some type of credential that makes sense depending on where you're working. But I think it's a pretty big misconception that every supervisor has to have the LPC, which isn't accurate. Although if, you know, I always say look into your state licensure boards to see if that makes a difference or at all in terms of counting your internship hours toward your license later on, because you're allowed to do that, and that's a good chunk of hours that you can count. So you want to make sure that that you're able to do that with whoever your supervisor ends up being. Supervisors also have to do a lot on Tavera, way more than they're doing right now for you in practicum. So there's lots more evaluations, a lot of observations that require them to complete rubrics that I would then as a faculty supervisor enter into Tavera as part of your portfolio. So there's a lot more responsibility in terms of, you know, what a supervisor has to do and getting documentation into Tavera. Plus really reviewing those logs on a week-to-week basis and, you know, signing off on them and all of that. So another big aspect in terms of internship is that there is a requirement to run a group process. So typically that's like four groups, and that way you're kind of seeing it through. Some sites have lots of groups and that doesn't end up being a problem for students. Other sites don't have groups, and sometimes students will struggle with getting a group established, getting participants in the group and getting those hours. The group work is also one of those tasks that has to be observed for your portfolio. And so that's another area where a supervisor would have to actually be watching you run a group. So that's one thing I absolutely like to point out with internship. If you're doing 2 different sites, it doesn't matter which site, you know, you end up doing the group work at all. It's just is that you have to have it as a requirement for PayCrep. The semester calendar, again, we don't know what fall is going to look like, but, you know, really when you're looking at internship, you know, I don't know how anybody could get it completed with, you know, within 10 weeks, you know, unless you're trying to like really kill yourself working overtime. But, you know, it runs the whole course. Even if you get those 600 hours in, let's say, November, you know, you're still finishing out, still accumulating those hours. And, you know, participating in the class, especially that counts as towards your overall grade, essentially. Site supervision is going to look pretty much the same as what you're getting now. A week of supervision at your site, and it could be group supervision, individual supervision, whatever it ends up being. If for some reason your supervisor has to miss a week, then it has to be made up. Typically, this is, you know, by another supervisor on site or your faculty supervisor if need be. So make sure that you are always looking into the backup supervision if you need to, so that you can get it on a week-to-week basis. Faculty supervision, it's a little bit different than what you're experiencing now in practicum. Again, you know, technically it kind of happens through those weekly class discussions in eCampus. You aren't going to be having that, you know, bi-weekly actual talking, communicating directly with your faculty supervisor. I know for me, what I do is typically allow, you know, kind of that open door policy for my students. If you need me, always reach out and I will absolutely provide some faculty supervision and internship. Otherwise, I would typically schedule, I don't know, like 2 to 3 calls over the course of the semester. I'll usually check in with site supervisors twice throughout the course of the semester just to make sure that everything is progressing and everybody's doing okay. But it's not as much supervision and internship because you're kind of spreading your wings and getting ready to go out and work without as much supervision. And the work in Tavera, again, you know, it's just going to be, I think, more than what you have to do now. You're logging more hours, of course, every single week, and then making sure that you're a lot of the rubrics and the artifacts, lost my train of thought there. The artifacts come at the end of the semester. And so a lot of the Tavera work really comes in more towards the end of the semester. There's also evaluations that are done in Tavera, a midterm evaluation, and then final evaluations, both from you evaluating your site, giving us some feedback as a program so that we know whether or not it really met the standards that it needs to meet. And if not, then if another student down the road wants to go to that particular site, we would typically discourage it. So, you know, you're filling out some evaluations on them as well as them completing those final evaluations for you. There's only going to be one section of internship, so you don't even need to worry about enrolling in multiple sections and thinking about faculty supervisors. It's just going to be the one. And I'm going to have you ignore the internship seminar slide here, okay? Because we aren't having an on-campus internship seminar this year again, and there isn't going to be an internship seminar in the fall. And so what I did with my students last semester, which is kind of make up the time that interns would typically be on campus through, I think I just did like individual or group Zoom meetings. I can't remember what I did, but we just made up the time. Okay, so applications. So I want you to get the application in sooner than later, of course. Remember, the application is different than the contract. If you are continuing with your site, just send me a quick email and let me know as a reminder, because there's a different way in Tavera that we can set things up so that it's not a complete replication of everything. We also had a lot of confusion last semester with interns who did that, and the system really got confused. And I don't want that to happen to you guys again. So let me know if you're going to be continuing on for either part of the internship or all of it as an integrated site. And that way I can kind of flag you as somebody that needs to have like a continuation within the Tavera system. So make sure to get the application in so we can check it. And if you're reaching out to internship sites, kind of scheduling those meetings, include me on, just CC me or BC me on the emails so that I know that the process is kind of moving along. I like to have everybody set, usually we kind of set the timeline for, you know, making sure you have at least a site identified and really moving forward with getting contracts in by spring break. We don't have a spring break this year. So, and I know things are a little bit crazy and some places really are waiting to make final decisions a little bit longer than they might typically. So my goal is just to have everybody really set on where they're going by the end of the semester, by the end of spring semester. If you're not, then you're probably going to get lots of emails from me so that we don't have to worry about it as much over the summer. Okay. Professional fitness stuff, you already had that. Oh, okay. So, we have like these, again, approved sites sometimes is what it's referenced as, especially in the clinical handbook. There are some things that may need to happen if you're looking at a site that no student from our program has ever used before. And so I don't want anybody to think that you can't find a new site. That happens. I mean, we have students all across the country that are finding new sites all the time. And so obviously that's going to happen. There are some things that if it's a site that no other student has ever used before, that there are some things that need to happen that involve me more or less before we can, give you that final, yes, the site is approved. So I would need to look at a website to make sure that it fits kind of our overall criteria. If you have to identify who your supervisor would be, and I'm going to need like a CV or a resume if it's not on that agency's website, just to verify credentials and education and all of that for the supervisor. That way I can get those that information entered into Tavera on the back end of everything. Some sites require agreements, affiliation agreements. It's not all sites, but some sites. And for that process, I have to actually work through WVU's legal team. And so it's and the dean of our college. So it takes time to do all of that. And if you're interviewing at sites, I always say, try to ask them if they need or require an affiliation agreement, because they're absolutely necessary steps that I have to take on my end to make sure we can get that approved, in a timely manner. Again, you got some time around summer, but summer, and especially in academia, you don't have as many people working in the summer, and I'm not sure what the legal building looks like in the summertime, but we'll just try to get it done sooner than later. Liability insurance, hopefully whatever you purchased for practicum, it was a year and you should be covered for the remainder of the year, not have to worry about that at all. I always emphasize the professionalism aspect of all of this. So in any of those communications, anytime you reach out to potential supervisors, make sure you're looking at it as from the start as an interview. You're interviewing and potentially really competing for positions right now because of COVID, because people aren't taking as many students. There's still the same number of students out there in the world that need these sites. And sometimes, there's a little bit more competition than I think I've ever seen before. Make sure when you get to the site that you're familiar with the dress codes, policies, lunch break policies, who to report to if you're not able to make it into work for one reason or another, how you're going to make up those hours. Again, looking at it as a job. If you haven't already done so, I always like to preach about the checking your social media, but those clients are going to find you, they're going to look for you. If you have social media up, make sure that it's, on lockdown in terms of being a private account, make sure pictures are appropriate if not. Just remember at the stage of, internship, I got a job offer at my internship site about halfway through. And so it's not like you have to have that happen or you have to take the job if it's offered to you, but it really is a way for an agency to really kind of vet you also as a potential employee. And a lot of times, work during internship does lead to jobs afterwards. So, just always be thinking about that as well. So if you can find paid internship sites, fantastic. Everybody needs money. It's not required for those experiences, but we certainly don't prohibit it. If you're using your place of employment, that's where that new learning needs to come in addition to objectives that are part of the class. I'll send around the new learning statement. So if you're working at the site, you need to just identify new learning. Illness, emergency type policies, just make sure, again, things come up and that's understandable. Internship is just, there can't be any kind of waiving of the 600 hours. Even with COVID, KCREP was not ever been willing to reduce the number of hours that is required for internship. So, regardless of what happens, in order for you to graduate, it has to be an internship that's completed with 600 hours. So those hours would have to be made up. Typically, in terms of university holidays and breaks, did I miss one? I don't know. Okay. inclement weather, snow days, sometimes in the fall, depending on where you live, that might, be an issue, depending, especially in West Virginia, you just never know. But you just want to be working it out with your site of what to do. And, if they're doing things virtually on days when the site might be closed, you remember you're following whatever your site's work schedule is. So if they have scheduled holidays and are closed, those are the scheduled holidays you want to take into account. If the university has holidays and breaks like Thanksgiving break or a fall break that they typically had, that does not mean that that's a break for you in terms of going to your internship site. You still want to make sure that you're getting those hours in on a weekly basis. Employment, I already went over that. You certainly can be employed or working at your place of employment. I've never personally had somebody that was working 600 hours in internship in an internship site and then working somewhere else. I would highly discourage that because internship is full time and my goodness, you need some time to rest your brains. And once I revamp the clinical experience handbook, it'll go up on the website whenever that's done, but I'll also email it out to you guys. Make sure to go over it as well. Once you get the updated version, make sure to go over it with your site supervisors or potential site supervisors. I really don't like for there to be lots of surprises for those site supervisors. And so all that information that they need to know about what their responsibilities are in this process are within that as well. And if they have questions, they can always reach out to me. Grading and evaluation. Yeah, there's different assignments within the class itself for internship. And then there's, the big ticket items are all those evaluations at the end. There's 4 portfolio artifacts at the end of the semester. One you do a case presentation more towards the end of the semester, and then you're evaluated from an ethical and professional standards standpoint on the group work, and I think the other one's just like, oh shoot, what is it? Helping relationships, that's what it is. So just viewing you actually conducting some counseling. And yeah, so grades can't be issued for internship until all of that stuff is done and completed. Again, I just really always like to stress with my students in internship that, oh, yeah. Somebody have a question? Okay. Make sure to just keep up on everything, especially because it goes week to week, and you can get behind really easily in internship if you're not keeping up with those weekly logs. So yeah, and if anything happens with Tavera early on in the semester, I know the same thing happened with a lot of people this semester, try to work things out through their support team, their IT support, go to your faculty supervisor. And if your faculty supervisor happens to be me, then hey, then the next step would be going to me. So you don't have to worry about that. But we can always get things worked out. Again, for me, within faculty supervision, I, if I'm seeing that my students are getting their logs in and they're just waiting for their supervisor to sign them, I look at that different than if my students are not getting their logs in in a timely manner. And then I reach out usually to the site supervisors and prompt them to get those logs signed. So yeah, that's all I've got. What questions do you guys have for me?
I don't have any at this time. I'm good for now.
Okay.
I'm here, no questions for me.
All righty. Okay. Well, things come up, and if and when they do, let me know. So as far as next steps go, just whenever you have more of a finalized idea of where you're going, send me an email, and then that'll be kind of the final approval, and then we can get everything into Vera, opened up for you and get you completing contracts and things of that nature. And then you're pretty much set. If you have all that done before summer, then you just get to enjoy summer. Or take lots
Thank you.
Whatever you guys are doing, I don't know, but so all right, well, I'll let you guys go, and thanks for coming tonight. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right.